is the Conservative American Message, hosted by the one and only Cam Lau. It's Saturday, December 17th, 2022, and thanks for tuning in for another week of the best politics podcast on Spotify. Last week we talked about the Loudoun County, Virginia School Board and how they covered up the fact that a transgender student was raping his female peers. I'm going to coin the word Loudongate right now. If you missed last week's episode, it was episode 5, you should go back and listen to it at like 3 minutes and 20 seconds and you'll hear all about that. But this week, the grand jury criminally indicted Loudoun County School Superintendent Scott Ziegler and other school officials for lying to the community about the sexual assaults occurring within their schools, even though they did have knowledge and actively tried to keep it quiet. Loudoun County Sheriff Michael Chapman wrote a letter to the superintendent calling him out for lying at the school board meeting after the sheriff's department had been involved. The school board has now voted to fire Ziegler and announced that they will be changing the policies to better ensure the safety of their students. It is yet unknown whether more school board members or district staff will face any charges for their involvement in the cover-up. It's good to finally see some justice, but we know that these transgender policies are being pushed across the nation. You might not think it's happening locally wherever you are, but I assure you that it is at all public schools. If you really don't believe me, start asking around and you might be surprised. Well, it really seems like a good time to be a lawyer in Virginia. There's so many big legal battles going down right now. In another one, a women's soccer player at Virginia Tech was benched and pressured to quit the team after she refused to kneel for the national anthem. Kirsten Henning is suing her coach for violating her First Amendment right to free speech when she didn't kneel before a match where the team had read a unity statement that expressed support for Black Lives Matter. Her coach verbally attacked her for disagreeing with the rest of the team. At the following matches, she was suddenly given less and less time on the field. Eventually, she quit after being harassed by her teammates and coaches for having her own beliefs. She made it very clear that she does believe that Black Lives Matter, but does not support BLM as an organization or the defund the police movement. But that doesn't matter to these wokesters. If you don't get in line and blindly participate in their so-called social justice protests, they will find a way to get rid of you. I have to say, hats off to this girl, because it's hard enough to take on the mob, but to even sacrifice her soccer career, which I imagine she's worked her whole life for, and stand up for herself takes some serious guts. It should be so obvious that she would win a case like this, but in these strange times, nothing can be certain. Our God-given constitutional rights are being called into question, and the so-called rights to not be offended and to do whatever you please are taking the place of our Constitution. Our freedoms in America shouldn't be so shaky as they are today, but we already know how quickly our freedoms were restricted over just a little virus. Right now, there's a 14-year-old girl in North Carolina who suffers from a condition called senior Loken syndrome, and she needs a life-saving kidney transplant. But instead of receiving the medical care she needs, she's been denied a kidney transplant by Duke University Hospital in Durham, North Carolina, because she did not receive the COVID vaccine. Even though she didn't get the shot, she has had COVID, so her parents argue that she has natural immunity. But they were told by doctors originally they only recommended the vaccine, and other than that, they have followed every recommendation given by the hospital staff. Then, suddenly, they were told they cannot go through with the transplant until she receives the vaccine. The family has now gotten an attorney and begun to fight the hospital while also searching for another hospital that will give their daughter the life-saving procedure without being vaccinated. How can a hospital deny someone care because they refuse to participate in their experimental medical practices? Isn't this America? We should have the freedom to make our own decisions with what someone can put in our body. If we continue giving up our freedoms in America like this, we'll end up like New Zealand, where parents' medical custody was turned over to the state because they wanted to give their child unvaccinated, clean blood. Their baby boy has severe pulmonary valve stenosis and needs a open-heart surgery. The parents, uncomfortable with the blood that has been vaccinated being put into their child, found enough unvaccinated donors to provide the necessary blood, but the government health service refused. They filed with a court to take over guardianship of the child and go ahead and use blood from the New Zealand Blood Service. A lawyer stated, "Parents have never had absolute rights." But hold on a second, I thought it was rights that trumped all. because when it comes to abortion, the same medical community will fully admit that a pregnancy means a woman is carrying a human baby, yet they argue that their rights are more important than the life of that baby. But then parents who actually have legitimate concerns about medical procedures being done to their child are told they need to get out of the way because they have no right. I would say that that's why I'm glad I live in America, and I am, but we've got to hold on to our freedom, guys. A German study recently found that mRNA vaccines can lead to not only infertility in some younger people, but also immune cells attacking the heart and causing death. The study involved autopsies of patients who received COVID shots and died within weeks. It proved that there is some risk to taking the vaccine, especially in younger men. Many doctors here in the States have now suggested to use the study to recommend that young healthy adults and children don't necessarily need to put themselves at risk, but that other adults and those who are immunocompromised are still recommended to get the shot. I'm not a medical professional, and that's probably the best advice out there based on science. But I still say, until we have years and years of data, don't take it. There's just not enough evidence to make a decision. And don't give it to your kids, for goodness sake, people. Ron DeSantis has now called for a grand jury to investigate wrongdoing related to the vaccine in his state. He announced this on Tuesday and said that he wants to provide Floridians with real facts and evidence. But Fauci got pretty worked up over this and doesn't know why in the world we don't just take his word for everything. This is what he had to say on CNN with Kate Baldwin.
And really no other virus in recent history has become so politicized as COVID-19. I mean, you found yourself, we've talked about this many times, at the center of some of that angry debate. Elon Musk just came at you and attacked you. But the latest now, Dr. Fauci, is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He's now asking the Florida Supreme Court to greenlight an investigation into, and the way he put it, is any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. What's your reaction to that?
I don't have a clue, Kate, what he's asking for. I mean, we have a vaccine that unequivocally is highly effective and safe and has saved literally millions of lives. The Commonwealth Fund has come out with a report just this past week that vaccinations that have been administered over this period of time, this last year and a half to 2 years, has saved 3.2 million lives, 18 million hospitalizations, and approximately $1 trillion in costs. So what's the problem with vaccines? I mean, vaccines are life-saving. So quite frankly, Kate, I'm not sure what they're trying to do down there.
It kind of gets at a bigger issue I've been wanting to ask you as in one of our final interviews in your role in public health is just one result of the pandemic has sadly been that science has become a divisive topic, politicized and weaponized by some people.
I want to know where he's getting these numbers, because every peer-reviewed study we see finds negative effects of the COVID vaccines, and it's just brushed off by Fauci. And I love how she says that science has been politicized. When you make up things to serve your agenda and call it science, then the word loses meaning. Whether it's COVID or abortion or climate change, they just deny the real science and invent their own studies to support their claims. Well, that's all I have time for. Were you offended by this podcast? If so, we'd love to hear all about it. Hit us up on Instagram at The Conservative American Message and tell us what we did wrong. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great week.